Hiya, welcome. My name is Calliope. I'm going to be your guide today. This video is filmed with ASMR in mind, so it's going to be done in a softer volume of voice. I'm going to be speaking slower, and these videos tend to be a lot longer than a usual informative video would be. So, if you're cool with that, we can proceed. Today I'm going to be talking to you about how to pick a houseplant. As I work in a greenhouse, the most common question I get besides, what is a plant I can't kill, is, so how do I pick out a houseplant? So I'm here to tell you how to figure that out and make it easier on yourself. So firstly, where does one purchase a houseplant? Sometimes people get them from a friend or their family. Sometimes they purchase them from garden centers or greenhouses, which is excellent. Sometimes they get them from the internet on websites like Etsy. Excellent. Sometimes they get things from the Walmart or from Lowe's or another big box store. Not a great place. Sometimes they may also get them from Amazon. Not a great place either. So a really good thing that I hope that you may consider is purchasing houseplants from garden centers, particularly family-owned or small businesses, as well as online from people rather than places/corporations, do a lot more good for the people that you're purchasing them from, rather than places that don't really care about their plants so much, and it's more just $1. So we'll get off the soapbox there, and that's where you can purchase some houseplants. Now, when you go in, you should kind of already have a place in your house or office, wherever you want to put it, have a place in mind. The reason you need to know this is because the first question I always ask is, what kind of lighting is this plant going in? So in plants inside, we usually rate our lighting in 3 particular ways, very simple ways: low, medium, and high light. So low light is going to be, for example, a north window, or perhaps a window that's blocked by some sheer curtains, or some distance away from a window. That's going to be a low light situation. We're not really getting too much light at all. Your next situation is a medium light. And medium light is going to be, for example, like an east window, or perhaps even kind of close to a west window. This is going to be a place that gets indirect light, and not a whole lot of light, but certainly a lot more than a low light situation. The last one, which is the best, is a bright light situation. This is going to be a little different from full sun in that you don't necessarily need to have any indirect sun, or perhaps you only have a couple hours of direct sun coming through your window. So this is going to be, for example, in the winter, a south window is going to be your strongest light source. A west window, pretty darn close to a west window, is going to be a bright light situation as well. So a lot of plants, I'd say 75% of them, are going to be doing very well with a medium to high light situation. So low light is a lot harder to deal with. However, there is going to be some plants that can tolerate and even thrive. So for people who have absolutely no light whatsoever, you're going to be better off with a fake plant. The exception to that is if you perhaps have an office setting with fluorescent lighting or a lot of light for 10, 12, up to 16 hours a day that are on. Then we can talk about things that can survive that, but they're not necessarily going to do very well. So, how to determine what kind of light you have, in addition to the direction that your window faces, you can also do a little trick with a white piece of paper. So, if you have your piece of paper in the spot that you want to put a plant, and you put your hand in front of it, if I put it like this, then I can see my shadow pretty darn well. So that's going to be kind of medium light because it's not very sharp. It's still a little fuzzy. But for example, if I put it and it comes more like this, where it's really fuzzy, that's going to be a lot more low light. And if we get real close, let's see, I'm trying to figure out how to... Okay, anyway, if I were to see a very sharp shadow here, then that would be more of a bright light situation. So most plants can adapt a little bit. It's better, in my opinion, to have a little brighter light than lesser light. But again, plants can adapt. However, I would not put a bright light plant in a low light situation or vice versa. However, a medium light plant perhaps can survive for some time in a low light situation, and it can also tolerate a higher light situation as well. So now we can get into what size you're looking for. That's always my second question. First being, how much light do you have? Second being, how big are you looking for? I haven't gotten any weird responses to that one yet. So generally, your smallest plant is going to be in a 1 to 2 inch pot. The inches refers to the diameter of the pot. So for example, in this very extremely sad looking guy, this is a 4 inch pot. The diameter is roughly 4 inches. So generally, in my greenhouse, we keep 2 inch pots all the way up to 16 inch pots. So that's a very, very large pot with plants that are 10, 12 feet tall easily. So if you are beginning, I would suggest staying with perhaps a 4 to 6 inch pot. If you get real small, then you're going to have to give it a lot more care than something that's perhaps a 4 to 6 inch pot, whereas they'll take care of themselves a little bit better than a very small pot, which will need a lot more water and a lot more looking after. So, talked about size, and pricing is also something you may want to consider. So, generally a 2 inch pot goes for $2.99 to $3.99 in US dollars. Something this size, let's forget about the plant, something this size generally starts at $4.99, and depending on the kind of plant, it can go up to, I've seen them go up to $19.99. And that was for a rattlesnake plant, which is a type of Calliope. So they can get kind of expensive, and something like this, for example, in the 6 inch pot, this one was purchased for $14.99. And again, you can get easily, $200, $300 given the size or the kind of the plant. So keeping a little budget in mind will also help you out. So a little list of some plants to perhaps consider when you're going in and looking for a plant. For an easy, low light tolerant plant, You can go with the Dracaena family. You can go with a Pothos. You can go with a ZZ plant, or a Philodendron, heartleaf Philodendron, or perhaps even a snake plant. For some easy, more medium light plants, you could go with a wandering Jew, or any member of the spiderwort / Trandescantia family. You could go with a Monstera, or a Swiss cheese plant, a Guiana Chestnut, which is also known as a money tree, and also a spider plant, like this one. And for a easy bright light situation, you could go with a Jade Plant, member of the Crassula family. You could go with a type of Pilea, like this one, pretty popular lately. You could go with an Aloe Vera, also known as Aloe barbadensis. You could go with a Haworthia, or you could do, most succulents or cacti will do extremely well in a bright light situation, and most of them are pretty easy. So, what are we looking for when we pick out a plant? We've figured out what kind of plant we want. Now we kind of want to see which plant to choose. So, you'll want to look for a plant with even growth. This one is one that does not have even growth. This is also one that I started myself, so I'm not going to knock it for that. So this one, of course, grows kind of in a line. There's nothing going on right here. There's not too much going on right here, and there's a lot going on right here. This is a bear paw, by the way. The leaves look like little paws. They're very fuzzy. So this is not a very even looking plant. However, something like this is pretty darn even all the way around. That's not to say that if you don't have an even looking plant that it won't do well. It's just more if you want it to be symmetrical, then look for something that's symmetrical when you purchase it. Another thing to look for is a plant that has, say, less than 1 to 2 brown or yellow leaves. If you've worked with plants before, you know that a couple of leaves that are not green, they're brown or yellow, the plant will be fine. It's not going to die. If half to most of the plant is brown or yellow, yeah, that probably will die. But it's not going to die if it has 1 leaf or 2 leaves that are brown or yellow. It'll be okay. And what you can do here, super easy, you pull them off. Just like that. And then it looks brand new. This is another one that, yep, we have 1 little stem here. I can pull that off. We have 1 yellow leaf, and we can pull that off. And now it looks a lot better. Now it looks a lot better. You're also going to want to look at having good coloring in the plant. So this plant, which is a silver satin pothos, or could also be known as a silver satin philodendron, of which it is neither, by the way. If this one were to be, say, very pale in color, then I probably wouldn't want to go with that, as it could mean that it's getting too much sun or too little sun. They often will get bleached out if they have too much sun, or if they didn't have enough, then their fighting for getting some light. So some bright, vibrant color is a good thing to look for when you're looking for a good houseplant as well. Okay, so we've picked out a plant and it looks good. Now, what kind of pot do we want to put it in? You don't have to put it into a pot if you don't want to. You can leave it in the pot it is currently. However, if you wanted to personalize it, or if it needs to be repotted, then you certainly can. So, for example, I have this ZZ plant here, and there we go. The pot is just set in this terracotta pot, as I don't want to repot it until we get closer to spring and it's actually going to put on some new growth. So for now, I just keep it in the pot that I'm going to eventually be putting it in. So you only want to go one size up when you are repotting your plant. So if I had a 4-inch plant here, I would only want to go up to a size 6-inch. You could do a 5-inch as well, but the main point is that you only want to go one size up. The reason you don't want to overpot it is then you're going to have a lot of extra soil that roots are not occupying. So that soil, when you water it, just essentially sits there with water that isn't able to be used. So what often happens is it rots the plant because it's sitting in water, essentially, that it can't even use. So now we get into, we have the size that we need. Now what kind? My personal favorite is using terracotta or clay pots, which is this orange clay, of course. So some pros to this is that they're porous. So if you were to overwater a little bit, this is going to help get rid of some of that moisture, and it helps everything in the middle to dry down and helps the bottom dry down. So overall, this is going to be a very good choice, especially if you're a beginner. So it gives you a little more leeway as far as watering goes. The only drawbacks to this, though, is that they do dry down quickly. So if you have a plant that likes a lot of moisture, you're going to be watering it quite a bit. Another thing is these are pretty breakable. So they're like glass. If you were to knock it, you're probably going to crack it or get a corner out. So they're quite breakable, and they can be very heavy. If you get a very large pot, they can be pretty heavy, especially when they're fully watered. Since they're also porous, you may want to keep in mind that the terracotta bottoms of these will probably weep water through. So if you have this on something very valuable, for instance, you may get some water spotting, so it's a better idea to use a plastic saucer on something or some kind of protective surface underneath these to make sure that they don't weep through and ruin any surface underneath. Our next option would be plastic, which plastic is okay. It's inexpensive, and that's often what your plant that you purchase will come in. So I do not like the ones with built-in saucers because you don't know when the water's coming out the bottom, and they also can leak pretty easy because you don't know how much water is in here. So if you overwater it a little bit, then it's going to overflow from that saucer. But again, inexpensive. You can get these in a lot of fun patterns and colors. but it is going to trap moisture in. So for something like a cacti or succulents, might not be a good idea if you're a beginner and are not quite sure how to water them yet. But for example, this spider plant is always needing water, so it's been doing pretty darn well in this plastic pot. Those are also going to be a little more sturdy. They can, of course, crack or break or warp, but they're less likely to as your terracotta pots. Another material you can do is ceramic, which is extremely similar to terracotta because it's a clay product, but they're glazed on the outside. So you can get a shiny, glossy finish or a matte finish. Those come in all kinds of colors and patterns as well. I do like ceramic over plastic. I feel like it still has a bit of that porosity, but again, you're also going to want a protective saucer, whether it's plastic or some kind of surface underneath it to keep it from weeping out the bottom. They also can get very expensive and they can get broken easily. Nowadays, you can also get resin planters, which I pretty much just lump those in with plastic planters, so they're alright, and they're more inexpensive, they're more durable, but they are going to trap the moisture in there. And lastly, some things I probably would not do is wood or metal. So unless you know these are treated or you have a protective cover inside it, then with wood you can easily get rot, and with metal you can get rust. And the rust is not good for the plants and can cause a rust fungal disease in the plant as well. And then it's a whole huge mess, so unless you're sure that these are treated or you have a protective insert in them, I wouldn't plant your plant directly into it. So we've got our pots, we've got our plants. Now what kind of soil do we need? So for cacti and succulents, luckily there is a cactus and succulent mix, generally. And for all your other tropicals, for the most part, they just need regular potting mix. Now if you were to say get an orchid or an African violet, then you're going to need different potting mix. If you were to get a carnivorous plant, different potting mix. Bromeliads, I would prefer not to be in regular potting mix, but those are things we're not talking about today, so we'll just leave that off. So generally, you'll use either a cactus and succulent mix, which is going to be faster draining than a regular potting mix. For all of the tropicals, then you can use regular potting soil. I personally would never use Miracle-Gro as it has a very high peat content, and from using good potting soil, it's really cheap. So, but I mean, if that's what you have to work with, you can certainly work with it, but personally not my speed. Some good potting soil mixes or brands come from Spoma or Hoffman or Fox Farm. So that would be like an ocean forest soil. Those are some pretty good brands, and generally your local garden center will also have their own line of potting mix. Those tend to also be a very good mix as well. So for some final touches, we've got our plant, our pot, our potting soil. Now we're just about finished. So some things to think about is perhaps some fertilizer. So you can get these either in a powder, a granule, or a liquid. I like to use organic liquids personally. So Espoma has a wonderful line of indoor fertilizers. Fox Farm is also a really good line of organic fertilizers. So both of these you mix according to the directions into water and then water your plants. if you're a beginner, I would especially recommend using an organic fertilizer, because that means that if you accidentally over-fertilize, your plant is a lot less likely to have a buildup of fertilizer. Fertilizer is essentially a mixture of salts and different minerals, so when you have too much salt, just like humans, it's not a good thing. More fertilizer does not equal more better, by the way. So if you go the organic route, then it's a lot harder to essentially poison your plants than it is with a chemical fertilizer. So we've talked about using plastic saucers underneath our plants to protect our surfaces. That's personally what I like to use all across the board, as they're very inexpensive, and then I don't have to worry about my water leaking all over or ruining any surface that the pot is on. And also, when you water your plant, your water should come out the bottom. So if you have a saucer on the outside, you know when it comes out the bottom. Speaking of watering, another good thing to use is a moisture meter. So the moisture meter is a little device that you put into your plant, and it tells you how wet or dry the soil is. So this is reading between 2 and a 3. My spider plant, I kind of like to water this when it's more on the 2 to 1 aspect, or when it just starts to wilt. So this you would put in several different places in your plant, and that helps to make sure that your plant is actually dry before you water it, and you're not getting a bunch of wet, muddy soil in the middle, as opposed to just a little bit dry on the top, a little bit dry on the bottom. So this, I believe, I purchased for $8, and I use it on anything that's over a 4-inch pot, because I can't really tell what's going on. If a pot's this big, I can only get about that much before I don't really know what's going on. So for the bottom half, then that helps me determine what's going on and whether I need to water it. And lastly, if you are a plant parent, then you already know that insects are generally a problem, and if you're a beginner, insects are generally a problem. So some good things as a preventative to maybe pick up is an insecticidal soap or even a horticultural oil. So these are organic approaches. These essentially smother the bugs. This has the active ingredient potassium salts of fatty acids, which I assume just kills them dead, and your horticultural oil smothers the bugs. So if you have some bug issues and you're not really sure what's going on, it's a good idea to talk to your local garden center, and they can help you determine how to tackle it, whether it's fungus gnats or mealybugs or aphids or spider mites, whatever it is. A lot of times these will do most of your bugs, but if you're not really sure what's going on, you may want to consult with your garden center or other plant parent that knows more than you do to make sure you're doing the right thing. So that about wraps it up. That's our little hard and fast video of what all to look for in a plant and what to do right after you have adopted your little plant baby and became a plant parent. So I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope you have a whale of a day. I'll see you later.